About a week into this slow-burning mess, when the rules were stacking up like unpaid bills and the air around the neighborhood felt tighter than a vice grip, I noticed something strange. It was one of those quiet things, easy to miss unless you've got a habit of paying attention to the little details. See, I installed a security camera on the corner of my garage about 5 years ago. Nothing fancy, just a decent, weather-resistant model I picked up off the internet after someone started swiping packages from porches up and down the block. Caught a guy on camera once too, wearing a hoodie and riding a bicycle he probably also didn't own. Cops never did much, but at least folks stopped losing their Amazon orders for a while. Anyway, I check that camera every few days out of habit. Just to make sure it's clean, aimed right, and the memory card's doing what it's supposed to do. But that morning, while sipping my second cup of coffee and letting Buddy outside to do his business, I looked up and something didn't feel right. The camera wasn't pointed where it was supposed to be. Instead of covering the driveway and the front edge of my garage like it always had, it was aimed off to the side. I mean way off, like someone had intentionally swiveled it to show the side yard, catching nothing but the neighbor's fence and my row of trash cans lined up like they were waiting for inspection. Now, I know what you're thinking, could have been the wind. Could have been an animal or even me bumping it by accident. That's what I told myself too, at least at first. But this wasn't some minor nudge. The angle was exact, purposeful. Whoever turned it knew where they didn't want it pointing. It had been twisted almost 90 degrees on its mount and it wasn't loose either. That bracket is bolted in solid. Took me 2 hours on a ladder to install it just right with weather-sealed fittings and reinforced screws so it wouldn't wobble during storms. This wasn't a bird flying into it or a branch brushing by. Someone had touched it. And not just touched, it had been adjusted. Still, I didn't say anything out loud. Not yet. Didn't want to sound like I was jumping at shadows. Paranoia isn't something I take lightly, and I've known enough guys who've gone down that road to understand the danger in leaning into suspicion without proof. Maybe I bumped it myself and forgot. Maybe Sharon's clipboard was getting to my head. Maybe it was nothing. But you know how you get that tickle at the back of your mind, like something's off-kilter in the universe, but nobody else sees it? That's where I was. Trying to ignore the alarm bells starting to ring. Then, that evening, something else happened, something that turned that quiet unease into a gut-deep certainty. I was out by the mailbox, just sorting through the usual stack of flyers, credit card offers, and HOA bulletins wrapped in plastic like they were worth reading, when James, he's the plumber from 2 doors down, came walking up. Good guy, salt of the earth. Built like a linebacker with forearms like steel pipes from 30 years of wrenching under sinks and crawling through crawl spaces. We nod to each other most days, maybe share a few words about the weather or the game. Nothing deep. But today, he looked uneasy. "Clay," he said, lowering his voice and glancing around like he didn't want anyone to hear. "You got a second?" "Sure," I said, curious now. "Everything all right?" He looked over his shoulder, like Sharon might be hiding in the hedges with her little clipboard and her pinched smile. Then he leaned in. "You ain't gonna believe what I saw." "Try me." He took a deep breath. "Middle of the night. Couldn't sleep, my back was acting up. I went out to get a drink, and I saw someone over by your garage." I felt my stomach clench. "Someone?" I asked. "Who?" He scratched his beard, clearly debating how much to say. I couldn't see the face real clear. They had a hoodie on. But it wasn't just some kid messing around. This person was standing on a step stool, reaching up toward your camera. My heart started thudding. "Did you call anyone?" He shook his head. Didn't want to jump to conclusions. Figured maybe it was you out there for some reason. But the way they were acting, like they were trying not to make noise. Real deliberate. They turned the camera, then walked off down the street, quiet as a whisper. I nodded, trying to stay calm. "You sure it wasn't a kid pulling a prank?" "I know what I saw, Clay," he said, looking me square in the eye. "And it wasn't a prank. This was someone who knew exactly what they were doing." That was all the confirmation I needed. My instincts had been screaming, and now I had backup. Someone had come onto my property in the dead of night and tampered with my security. That wasn't just a nuisance, that was a line crossed. I didn't sleep much that night. Spent most of it pacing my garage, trying to figure out what the hell was going on. I thought about the camera, about Sharon and her sudden crusade to civilize the neighborhood, about the way she looked at my garage like it was a problem that needed solving. The new rules, the fines, the inspections. And now this. Someone sneaking onto my property and turning my camera away from the driveway like they didn't want to be seen. It wasn't hard to put 2 and 2 together. The next morning, I checked the footage. Or tried to. The memory card was wiped clean. Not full. Not corrupted. Just blank. Like someone had popped it out and erased the whole thing. That's when I knew this wasn't just about curb appeal or upgrading the community. This was personal. Somebody wanted me to feel watched, controlled, maybe even scared. But they didn't know me very well if they thought fear was going to do the trick. Instead, I got to work. First thing I did was replace the camera. Not just replace it, upgraded it. Got a model with live cloud backup and night vision so sharp you could read a license plate from the moon. Installed 3 more units too, front yard, side yard, and one pointed straight down the driveway from the peak of the roof. Wired them up to a closed system inside my workshop with backup power and motion alerts sent straight to my phone. If a mosquito blinked too hard near my property, I was going to know about it. Then I started documenting everything. Took photos of the camera's old angle. Took timestamped screenshots of the new footage. Made a written log of every interaction I'd had with Sharon and the HOA in the last 3 weeks. Because if they were going to keep pushing me, I wasn't going to wait around to get steamrolled. I was going to be ready. I didn't say a word to Sharon. Not yet. Let her think she was winning, that she was nudging me into a corner with her fines and her rules and her fake smiles. Let her underestimate me. That's always been a mistake folks make when they meet a man who works with his hands. They think because I wear coveralls and spend my days fixing other people's problems, I must not be smart enough to see what's coming. But I didn't survive 20 years in that house by being stupid. I was raised by a man who taught me how to weld before I could legally drive, who made me memorize the wiring diagram of a Chevy before I went to prom. He always said, "Son, never start a fight. But if someone brings one to your door, you finish it clean." And let me tell you something, the fight had come to my door. And I was just getting started. "Hey Clay," James says, leaning out the window of his pickup as he rolls past my driveway the next morning, "saw some car going in and out of your garage real late last night. You doing some kind of side work?" I looked up from my coffee and narrowed my eyes. Side work? Hell, I was dead asleep by 9:30. Buddy was already snoring like a chainsaw with asthma. I turned in early, tired from cutting cedar all day. James gave me a half shrug, like he wasn't accusing me of anything, just sharing what he saw. "Well, it sure looked like somebody was in there. Garage light was on around midnight, and I saw brake lights backing out. Figured maybe you had a rush job." That didn't sit right. I thanked him and stood there for a second, feeling this tight little twist in my gut. Something was off. I stepped into the garage, mug still in hand, expecting to see everything as I left it. Tools hanging, workbench organized, the faint scent of cedar dust still lingering. Instead, what I saw stopped me cold. Right there, on the concrete floor, fresh oil stains. 2 of them. Small, perfect little circles about the size of a salad plate, dark and still wet. I knelt down and touched the edge of one with my fingertip. Still slick. Still fresh. Definitely not mine. I know every leak, drip, and blemish that old Ford of mine has ever made. I've wiped up every one with a shop towel and labeled half of them in my head. But this? These weren't mine. And they sure as hell didn't come from any project I've worked on. Someone had been in my garage. Parked in it. Like it was their space. Like they belonged. My mind was racing, hands clenched into fists before I even realized it. I paced in a slow circle, scanning the floor. There was a faint tire mark too, dust disturbed just enough to leave a trace from where a wheel had turned and moved out. Buddy padded in behind me, his ears perked. He gave a single, sharp bark like he sensed the change in energy. "Something's going on, boy," I muttered. "And I don't like it one bit." That Friday afternoon, I tried to clear my head by getting back to work. Figured I'd finish up the custom sign order for a new bakery opening on Main Street. Cedar wood slab, hand-routed letters, sanded smooth and sealed with a protective coat so it'd last a good decade or more. I was just laying out the stencils when I heard the click-click of heels on the driveway. That sharp, deliberate kind of walking that tells you the person coming isn't here for a friendly chat. And sure enough, here comes Sharon. Same pressed slacks, same clipboard, same judgmental squint. Except this time, the sweetness in her voice was gone, replaced with that official tone bureaucrats use when they think paperwork gives them a backbone. "Mr. Russell," she called out, striding into my garage like she owned it, "this is a formal violation notice." I didn't even look up yet. Just kept sanding the edge of the board, but I could feel my blood pressure spike like a geyser. "What's the charge this time, Sharon? Paint too rustic for the neighborhood?" She held the document out like it was radioactive. Your garage gate was open for 9.5 hours yesterday. I blinked. 9.5. She nodded with the satisfaction of someone who had caught a career criminal. Our community regulations specify a maximum of 8 hours. You exceeded that by 90 minutes. You been timing me? I asked, now turning to face her fully. Like, standing out here with a stopwatch. She didn't flinch. We have volunteers who help us monitor compliance. Volunteers, I repeated slowly. You mean someone you convinced to play spy for the HOA? Rules are rules, she said, the words cold and mechanical. This violation carries a fine of $150. If it happens again, the amount doubles. $150. For leaving my own garage open. That's groceries for 2 weeks. That's brake pads and rotors. That's a utility bill. Hell, that's sanity, all being siphoned off into some HOA slush fund. I gritted my teeth, trying to stay civil. Sharon, I've been working in this garage the same way for 20 years. No one ever said a damn thing until you showed up. Well, things change, she said with a thin smile. And it's my responsibility to ensure that everyone follows the new standards. We're all about progress here. Progress, here? That's what she called it. To me, it felt more like slow strangulation wrapped in red tape. That night, I drove out to the electronics store and bought a second camera system. Nothing fancy, just something that recorded to a hard drive and would let me monitor all the footage myself. I wasn't taking any more chances. If someone was playing games with my property and my peace of mind, I was going to catch them in the act. But I had this gnawing sense that I was already behind the curve. That Sharon's plan, whatever it was bigger than just some fines and paperwork. And that the consequences weren't going to stop at oil stains and citations. Unfortunately, I was right. Wednesday morning started out just like any other. Cool air, sunlight breaking over the rooftops, and the smell of coffee brewing while Buddy scarfed down his breakfast. I got a call around 6:45 from a family across town. Their garage gate spring had snapped, and they couldn't get their car out. Needed it fixed before they left for work. Seemed like a simple enough job, nothing I couldn't handle. Probably 3 hours max, and they were always good folks. Paid on time, never haggled. I loaded the truck, checked my tool bag twice, and told Buddy to hold down the fort like always. He gave me his usual half-hearted tail wag and flopped back down in his bed by the back door. I headed out just before 7 a.m., figuring I'd be home by lunch. Maybe even have time to finish that bookshelf order for Mrs. Taylor's grandson's birthday. Looking back, something felt off that morning. Can't say exactly what, just that eerie stillness in the air, like the calm before a storm that hasn't hit yet. At 11:07 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was the landline from the house calling my cell. That system was old, but reliable, something I'd set up myself back when my dad had a heart attack and I wanted a quick way to monitor emergencies. And the only thing that would trigger that system now was Buddy. I answered, and all I could hear was barking. Not the casual, hey, a bird flew by, kind of barking. This was the deep, guttural alarm bark he only used when someone was somewhere they shouldn't be. My heart dropped. Something was wrong. Very wrong. I wanted to drop everything and fly home that second, but the family was counting on me. I'd promised I'd get them to work on time, and I don't break promises. I finished the job fast but clean, then packed up and headed home, probably going a little over the speed limit, but not enough to attract attention. As soon as I turned onto my street, I knew something was off. My truck wasn't where I left it. A tipped-over coffee cup lay on the pavement. Something felt violated. Rearranged. Like someone had rifled through my life with greasy hands. The garage gate was shut. That never happens. Not when I'm working a same-day job. I always leave it open to make unloading easier. Been that way since the day I moved in. But now? Sealed tight like a tomb. I clicked the remote and the gate creaked upward, slower than usual, as if even the mechanics of the thing knew something was wrong. And that's when I saw them. 2 Lexus. A white one, Sharon's, I'd recognize that smug vehicle anywhere, and a sleek black one I didn't recognize, parked. Where my workbench used to be. Right there. Inside my garage. In my space. Like I was the guest and they were the hosts. For a moment, the world just froze. I genuinely wondered if I had the wrong house. But there was Buddy, barking his head off through the side window, and there was my mailbox, still reading Russell, in hand-carved lettering I'd done myself in '03. This was my house. But it sure didn't feel like it. Hands trembling, I pulled out my phone and called 911. Even as I spoke, I knew how insane I sounded. Hi. Yeah. Someone broke into my garage and parked in it. Silence on the other end. Then, a calm voice said, "Sir, is there a threat to your safety at this moment?" "No," I admitted, "but this ain't right." An officer, Jenkins, I think, showed up about an hour later. Young guy, but not green. Seemed like he'd dealt with his share of weird. He took one look, scratched his chin, and said, "Well, sir, do you have any evidence of forced entry?" "No. But someone got in here. Moved my truck. Parked their cars in my garage." He nodded slowly. "If there's no damage, and they had access without force, then this is a civil matter. You'll need to talk to your HOA or get legal counsel." Legal counsel. Right. Like I keep a lawyer on speed dial. I called the HOA office. Voicemail. "Miss Sharon is currently in meetings," the receptionist said. I left 3 messages. No one called back. Tried calling around to lawyers. One wanted $500 just to hear my story. Another was booked until October. Third one listened, then paused, and said, "Well, Mr. Russell." And that's where everything began to unravel. "Mr. Russell," the third lawyer said on the phone, her voice clinical and cold as a hospital waiting room, "this is quite unusual. But yes, if they didn't technically break in, and there's no proof of criminal intent, this could take months to resolve through proper civil channels." Months? I nearly shouted, trying to keep the anger out of my voice and failing. "Lady's got my garage hostage and you want me to wait months?" That's when it hit me. Not a slow realization, either. No gentle dawning of truth. It hit like a wrench dropped from a rooftop onto concrete. The system wasn't going to help me. I was on my own. No lawyer wanted to touch the case without thousands of dollars up front. The cops said it was a civil issue. And the HOA? Well, they had built themselves a fortress of voicemail boxes and locked doors. Sharon might as well have been president of her own little nation, and I was just another angry peasant shouting at the gates. That night I tried to sleep, but my own bed was blocked off, along with the rest of my tools, my backup gear, and even my damn sleeping bag. So I laid there on my lumpy old couch, neck twisted at a miserable angle, staring up at the water-stained ceiling. I kept telling myself I'd patch one of these weekends. My back was screaming. Buddy was restless, pacing between the living room and the window, letting out little whines every few minutes like he knew something wasn't right in the universe. And he was right. I scratched behind his ears and muttered, "I know, boy. I know it's all wrong. But don't you worry. We're gonna fix this, one way or another." As the sky outside shifted from black to dark gray, a plan started forming in my head. Not some hopeful idea about the HOA finally returning my calls or the police suddenly deciding to care. No. This plan was the other kind. The kind that starts with a quiet what if, and ends with sparks, smoke, and consequences. The kind my daddy might have cooked up, back when a man handled things with grit and steel instead of lawsuits and polite emails. But I'm not reckless, never have been. So I gave the civilized route one more honest try. Thursday morning, after stretching out my back and popping 3 ibuprofen, I called the HOA again. Got the same chirpy receptionist with the phony enthusiasm. "Regional Director Sharon is in meetings all day," she told me, like it was a recording. "Uh-huh," I said. "Well, tell her Clay Russell called. And if I don't have my garage back by sundown, she's gonna wish she never heard the word violation." I left 3 more voicemails that day. Each one a little shorter, a little less polite. Guess how many people called me back? If you guessed 0, congratulations, you understand how this neighborhood really works. At that point, I started calling lawyers again. First one wanted $5,000 upfront, just to start the paperwork. Second one said he couldn't even meet with me until November. Third one finally listened to the whole story, sighed like I was just another headache in his day, and said, "Well, Mr. Russell, you could sue. But you're looking at a minimum 6-month delay, if everything goes smoothly." 6 months. I'd be 63 by then. Assuming I didn't die of frustration or get locked up for grabbing a wrench and solving this the old-fashioned way. That's when I stopped thinking of this as a legal problem. This wasn't paperwork. This wasn't about bylaws and committees and community standards. This was a siege. And I was going to end it the way any decent man would if someone marched into his home and declared it theirs, with a response they'd never forget. Later that afternoon, George wandered over carrying a 6-pack of Budweiser and his old folding lawn chair. "Can't sit in the garage, not anymore, not with Sharon's Lexus parked there like smug little trophies. So we made do on the porch, like it was 1975 and we were just two war vets comparing scars and stories. Except my war hadn't ended yet. I told George everything. From the first oil stains to the phony citations, to the cars parked like they owned the place. I didn't leave anything out. George listened the whole time without interrupting. Just drank his beer and let me talk. When I finished, he looked at the garage gate, then back at me, eyes slow and thoughtful. "You know what, Clay?" he said, voice gravelly like tires on an old dirt road. 30 years in the army taught me one thing for damn sure: sometimes the system don't work. Sometimes, you gotta make your own justice. He took another sip. "You got skills, son. Real skills. Welding, mechanics, problem solving. You're not helpless. Never have been." I nodded slowly. He leaned forward, elbow on his knee. "Seems to me like that garage gate of yours is due for a permanent adjustment." It clicked. Not like a light bulb, but like the chamber of a revolver turning into place. Weld the gate shut. 8 points ought to do it. 4 on the main track, 2 on the emergency release, and 2 just to be petty. Trap her cars inside. Let her try and get them out without me. Let her explain that to her precious board and her precious friends. Now, I ain't a vengeful man by nature. Ask anyone on this street. I'm the guy who fixes lawnmowers for free, who brings in your garbage bins when you forget, who rescued a stray cat and built her a little house under my porch. I don't go looking for fights. But this wasn't a fight I started. This was a line in the sand. And someone had danced over it in heels and a Lexus. That night, I called George after I'd given it a good 4 hours of clear-headed thought. I wanted to make sure I wasn't just pissed off. That this was something I could live with. "You mind watching Buddy for a few days?" I asked. He didn't even ask why. Just said, "Say no more, brother. You do what you gotta do. I got your boy." That's what good neighbors do. They don't ask for explanations when they already know you're right. I packed a week's worth of clothes, my welder, protective gear, and enough food to live out of a cheap motel for a few days. Chose 1-2 towns over, close enough to drive back in under 30 minutes if I needed to, far enough that Sharon wouldn't spot my truck. Midnight rolled around, and I pulled out of George's driveway, the welder in the back like a sleeping dragon. The street was quiet, no porch lights, no dog walkers, nothing but the wind through the pine trees and the soft hum of power lines overhead. I parked around the corner and walked the last block with my welding gear slung over my shoulder like a soldier heading to battle. I could feel every step. My heart thumped like war drums in my chest, but my hands? Steady as ever. Because I knew what I was doing. This wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. Before I started, I did what my daddy always taught me: walked the perimeter. Checked every angle, every corner. Security lights, working. Street, empty. Garage gate, untouched. Then I checked the power source twice. Couldn't afford a breaker tripping halfway through this job. I knelt beside the gate and ran my fingers along the edges. Cold steel. Familiar. Comforting. This gate and I had history. I'd built it myself, modified the mechanisms, reinforced the track years ago when a neighbor's kid tried to climb it. I knew its every bolt and bearing. Tonight, it would become something else entirely, a barrier. I struck the first arc and flinched, not from the heat, but from the enormity of what I was doing. Last time I welded something serious was a bridge support in the next county after a storm washed half the road out. My dad stood beside me, hands on his hips, nodding with approval. "Welding ain't about metal, son," he'd said. "It's about will." Those words echoed in my ears with every molten streak. 8 weld points. That was the plan. I laid the first 2 like I was writing a love letter in sparks. Then 2 more. Then 4 final ones, deeper, hotter, seared in tight as bone. One wrong move and this whole thing could have gone south, but I was methodical. Precise. Each strike of the rod was like my signature. I wasn't just sealing steel, I was sealing justice. By the time I finished, the smell of burnt metal and ozone filled the air, clinging to my clothes like evidence. I stepped back and looked at the work. That gate wasn't opening unless you had an acetylene torch and 3 hours of patience. And maybe not even then. Buddy's silhouette was still in George's window. Watching. I gave him a salute and whispered, "Don't worry, boy. Daddy fixed it." I drove away slow. No tire screech. No hero music. But I felt something loosen in my chest that hadn't let go in weeks. Was it legal? Probably not. Was it fair? Hell yes. So what would you have done? Wait 6 months while some rich bully parked in your soul's workspace? Or remind them the hard way that some lines aren't meant to be crossed. That night, I slept like a man who finally remembered what it felt like to take back his life. I wasn't sure if this was the smartest thing I'd ever done or the dumbest, but either way, I was past the point of second-guessing. Committed. Like a man who jumps off a cliff only to remember halfway down he's got no wings, no parachute, and nothing but a hard landing waiting below. But I'd made my peace with it. Sometimes in life, you hit a wall, and the only way through is to stop being polite and start using a blowtorch. The welding work moved faster than I expected once I found my rhythm. Something about the quiet of the night, the solitude, and the hum of the machine grounded me. I focused, tunneled in. First step, the main hinge points. Thick, deliberate beads laid down like signature strokes on steel canvas. These weren't lazy tack welds, they were solid, flowing seams, the kind that would hold through a hurricane and still laugh afterward. Every movement had purpose. Every flicker of the arc was a small act of defiance. I could feel the heat radiating through my gloves, the vibration in my bones, and the familiar sting of ozone hitting my nose as the torch bit into the metal. That smell, hot steel and faint ionized air, wrapped around me like an old friend. Mixed with the faint pine-scented breeze drifting through the trees, it created something weirdly intoxicating. Rebellion, nature, and craft all swirling together in the dark. I paused every few minutes, lifting my visor, scanning the neighborhood. Nothing moved. No porch lights flicking on. No nosy dog walkers or curtain peekers. Not even a bored teenager sneaking a smoke. Just the soft rustle of trees and the occasional chirp of some stubborn cricket refusing to call it a night. Perfect. I turned back to the gate and hit the next weld. The track guides were next. If the hinges kept the door from swinging open, the guides kept it from sliding even a centimeter to the side. Without them, Sharon, or whoever she begged to help her, might have had a shot at brute forcing it open if they powered through the hinge welds. But with the guides locked in place? Forget it. That gate was as good as a decorative wall. A tomb. An exhibit. Something you could look at but never use again. As I moved along the metal, my mind wandered back to memories I hadn't thought about in years. Me, maybe 9 or 10 years old, sitting on an upside-down milk crate in Dad's old shop. Watching him work. He didn't say much most of the time, wasn't a man of words. But when he did speak, you listened. I remember the way he held that torch, steady as a sniper. Not aggressive, not reckless, just focused. Every motion had weight. Pay attention to the puddle, he'd say without looking up. Metal tells you what it wants. You just gotta listen real close. At the time I didn't get it. Thought it was some poetic nonsense. But now? With sparks flying past my boots and the weld pool glowing like molten honey, I understood exactly what he meant. The metal wanted to stay closed. It wanted to hold. It wanted peace. Same as me. Then came the genius part, the little devil sitting on my shoulder whispering sweet ideas. I grinned in the dark, couldn't help it. The emergency release. That was the ace in the hole. The gate's final escape hatch, that tiny lever most people never even think about. Sharon would, though. She'd press it 50 times, thinking she was clever. Thinking she found a loophole. But it wouldn't do squat. Because I welded it shut. Delicate work, that part. Needed to be precise, clean. No rough, obvious gobs of filler. This had to look untouched from the outside, invisible sabotage. I sealed that lever like it never existed. When I stepped back and looked at it, smoothed down and flush with the surrounding panel, I knew she wouldn't notice until it was far too late. That last weld hummed beneath my gloves like a living thing. I leaned against the wall and exhaled, the tension draining out of me in stages. Every spark I'd sent flying tonight felt like burning away a piece of Sharon's smug little empire. Each sizzle erased one of her citations, her warnings, her condescending notes. I wasn't just sealing steel. I was melting down her grip on my peace of mind. I should have felt bad. I mean, technically, this was criminal mischief or sabotage or trespassing or whatever term the cops might dig up. But honestly, I felt good. Real good. Like I'd finally stopped being the guy who lets himself get pushed around. This wasn't just revenge, it was reclamation. A man staking his flag back in the dirt he built his life on. By 1:15 a.m., I was doing my final inspection. Flashlight in one hand, I crouched down and ran my fingers along the welds, slow, reverent. Smooth arcs, solid ridges, deep fusion. Permanent as a gravestone. No gaps, no shallow bites. Just clean, professional craftsmanship. If you didn't know what you were looking for, you'd never guess what had been done. From the street, The gate looked like it always had, maybe a little shinier in spots. But to anyone who understood welding? It spoke volumes. A silent message. One only folks like me could read. I hit the remote, just to be sure. The motor purred like a cat waking up from a nap. It tried. God, did it try. You could hear it strain for a few seconds, like an old man trying to lift something too heavy. Then it gave up. Let out a mechanical sigh, whirring to a stop with a kind of sad resignation. Nothing moved. Not even a tremble. Perfect. Now came cleanup. Critical stage. Can't leave behind clues. I collected every stub of welding rod, every bead of slag. Even scooped up the tiny curls of steel from where I ground the surface flush. Went over the area twice with a flashlight and a broom. Sprayed down the driveway with the hose to wash away any scorch marks or scorch smells. Left it looking cleaner than when I started. No signs. No fingerprints. Back at the truck, I stowed the gear in reverse order, just like Dad taught me. Wipe everything down. Latch every case. Check every compartment. This wasn't a rush job. It was art. Precision mattered. I could have done this half-assed and sloppy, but I didn't. Because that's not who I am. I left George a note in his mailbox. 3 pages, handwritten. Buddy's feeding times. His favorite toys. What brand of treats he gets on Thursdays. The emergency vet number, just in case. That dog was family, and I wasn't about to leave him behind like some afterthought. I figured I'd be gone a day or 2, maybe 3 at most. Long enough to let the dust settle. But I needed to be sure he was taken care of. Then I climbed into the cab, turned the key, and rolled away slow. No headlights until I was 2 streets over. No dramatic exits. Just a quiet retreat. Mission complete. Driving away from my own house felt strange. Like walking away from a version of myself that I didn't need anymore. The roads were mostly empty. A few semis, some tired nurses heading home, a gas station clerk closing up. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see flashing lights or a pissed-off Sharon in her pajamas chasing me in a rage. But all I saw was dark trees and sleepy lights. It felt like I'd lit the fuse on a stick of dynamite and now I was just waiting for the boom. I didn't know how big it was gonna be, or how many windows it might blow out, but I'd accepted whatever fallout was coming. The motel I picked was plain and cheap, but that suited me fine. I didn't need luxury. I needed a bed, a lock, and Wi-Fi. The room had a sagging mattress, faded wallpaper with cigarette burns, and a bathroom faucet that squealed when you turned it. The coffee in the lobby tasted like pool water passed through a gym sock. But the Wi-Fi worked well enough, and my security cameras came online like old friends checking in. I pulled up the feeds, sipped the bitter coffee, and settled into the creaky chair like it was mission control. NASA, except instead of waiting for a rocket launch, I was waiting for Sharon to realize she'd just stepped into a trap of her own making. By 6 in the morning, I was pacing. Called George. He said Buddy was fine as frog's hair, in his words, but the dog kept pacing by the gate like he could sense something brewing. Smart dog, that Buddy. Always had a nose for trouble. 7 a.m. sharp. Right on cue. There she was. Sharon. White Lexus, hair perfect, probably spritzed with lavender perfume and cruelty. She pulled up to the gate with the confidence of a queen entering her court, steaming coffee in one hand, remote in the other. She pointed it like a wand, expecting instant obedience. Nothing. She tried again. And again. Motor hummed, nice and smooth. But the gate didn't move. Not even a shiver. She got out, still clutching her coffee, and walked up to the gate. That's when the confusion hit. You could see it on her face, even through the pixelated camera feed. She didn't get it. Something was wrong with her world. A world where things usually snapped into place at her command. And then she saw the welds. 8 beautiful seams of protest. 8 strokes of no, the look on her face? Priceless. Confusion, then recognition, then rage. Her whole day derailed by craftsmanship she didn't even know how to insult properly. Instead of calling me like a rational person, Sharon called the HOA maintenance guys. What followed? Well, that was just the opening act. But here's the thing about welding, the real kind, not the patchy stuff folks do in their garages with a borrowed torch and a YouTube video. I'm talking about welds that bond steel like bones fusing after a clean break. Welds that become part of the metal, not just something sitting on top of it. And I don't say this to brag, though maybe I've earned the right after 30 years of burning rod, but I am really damn good at it. Good enough that when those professional cutters rolled in with their top-shelf tools and contractor-grade swagger, I leaned back in my motel chair, sipped my terrible coffee, and waited for the show. It took them 6 hours. 6 hours. To cut through exactly one of my 8 welds. I sat there watching the feed on my laptop while the motel AC rattled like an asthmatic mule. These weren't hobbyists, they were professionals. Pros with plasma cutters, hydraulic grinders, all the bells and whistles. But my welds? They weren't just obstacles. They were statements. Messages written in molten steel, translated only by those fluent in the language of resistance. And Sharon? Lord have mercy, she was unraveling faster than a discount sweater. The camera caught her pacing like a tiger in a glass cage, phone practically fused to her ear. She was calling everyone she knew, contractors, engineers, probably half the HOA board. Watching her try to throw money at the problem like it was some kind of scratch she could buff out made me feel something close to pity. Almost. You could tell she was used to being the person with solutions, not roadblocks. The kind of woman who thought checks and charm could solve anything. And maybe they could, until she ran into someone who wasn't afraid to say no, someone who knew how to weld that word into steel and bury it deep. I might have felt guilty about what I'd done, if I hadn't remembered everything she put me through. The citations. The smug lectures. The way she walked around our little cul-de-sac like a monarch surveying her domain. I hadn't just welded shut a gate, I'd welded shut months of silent humiliation. I'd sealed away her smug superiority, one beat at a time. By evening, Sharon was spiraling. Her perfectly coiffed exterior was cracking, bit by bit. The camera caught her shouting into her phone, then crying, then shouting again. Her body moved in frantic little loops, pace, phone, gesticulate, yell, check the welds, repeat. It was like watching someone have a breakdown on fast forward. I started to worry, truth be told. Not because I was afraid of getting caught. No, I'd planned this too well for that. But because people like Sharon don't back down, they escalate. And she was overdue for a meltdown big enough to drag everyone in. Shouting distance down with her. My gut told me we were headed for fireworks. Around 8 p.m., right on schedule, the cops showed up again. Same officer from last time, young guy with a tired expression, the kind you only earn from repeated exposure to rich folks yelling about problems they created themselves. 3 neighbors were already camped out on their porches with folding chairs and drinks, like they were watching a live taping of some trashy HOA reality show. One of them even waved and said, "Back again, here?" I nearly choked on my motel coffee when I saw that. Even in grainy footage, the cop's smirk said everything. He knew exactly what kind of drama he was dealing with. Now, I couldn't hear the audio, but I could read the body language clear as a billboard. Sharon pointing wildly at the gate. The officer holding up a hand, calm but firm. My guess? She was yelling vandalism. Maybe even false imprisonment. Something dramatic. And the cop? He was probably explaining that it was my garage, my gate, and my property. That unless she had a court order or could prove an emergency, which she couldn't, there wasn't a damn thing he could do. But my cars. I imagined her wailing. And again, maybe she should have thought about that before treating the neighborhood like her personal fiefdom. You don't get to break into someone's space and then play the victim when it gets sealed shut behind you. And that's when I saw it. Sharon slumped on the curb, head in her hands, looking more defeated than I'd ever seen her. All the bravado, the authority, the clipped, HOA president confidence was gone. Just a woman who realized for the first time in her life that she couldn't control everything. And here's the twist, I didn't feel as good about it as I thought I would. Part of me, yeah, I was proud. Vindicated. I stood up for myself. But another part? A quieter, older part? It started whispering doubts. Had I gone too far? Or had I just hit the exact amount of resistance she needed to finally understand she wasn't untouchable? Either way, I knew this wasn't over. Sharon wasn't the kind to walk away licking her wounds. She was going to come back swinging. This was just intermission. Chapter 7 was going to be a banger, and I wasn't sure yet whether I'd end up the hero or the cautionary tale. And just when I thought things couldn't get messier, my old buddy George did what George always does, he started talking. Bless him, but that man couldn't keep a secret if you welded it to his lips. By Thursday morning, the sweet old lady next door knew about my midnight welding escapade. By lunch, she told the couple with the twins across the street. And by Friday? Hell, the whole neighborhood was buzzing. And the kicker? Nobody was mad. Nobody thought I was crazy. In fact, it was like I'd lit a match in a room full of gas. Turns out, I wasn't alone. Everyone had a Sharon story. A $200 fine for a blue mailbox. Citations for kids' bicycles left on driveways. Even a young couple trying to dry their laundry outside got slapped with a violation for inappropriate outdoor textile display. I swear, you'd think they were hanging porn, not baby onuses. My act of defiance? It gave folks permission. Permission to stop pretending. Permission to speak up. Permission to resist. And that's when the SUVs rolled in, 3 black ones, like a damn federal sting. Regional HOA. The real bosses. The ones who don't smile when the clipboard queens go off script. I watched Sharon melt in real time as they stood in her driveway, serious faces and folded arms, pointing, pacing, scribbling on legal pads. Whatever fantasy she'd built of herself as queen of the cul-de-sac. They were dismantling it one sentence at a time. And the cherry on top? While I was reviewing camera footage the night before, trying to trace back the mysterious oil stains and odd movements around my garage, I found something better than gold. A video. Dated 2 weeks before Sharon officially moved her cars in. It showed her. And some mystery man. Unlocking my gate. Moving my tools. Parking her car like she was doing a test fit. Taking pictures. Smiling. Like they were rehearsing a takeover. She'd planned the whole thing. A hostile annexation. Probably thought that if she parked there long enough, she'd somehow establish ownership, claim the space as common property. So I emailed that video to the regional office. With a polite message, of course. Just a homeowner curious about his rights. And wondering whether unauthorized garage staging violated the sacred HOA covenants. Let's just say I never got another citation after that. Monday morning, I'm sitting in the motel diner, flipping sausage and eggs, bacon slicker than my truck's engine, with Buddy's funny face in my dreams, when my phone rings. For a heartbeat I think it's Sharon calling to beg forgiveness or announce she's waving the white flag. But no. It's the regional director from the management company, all business and clipped professionalism, but with a hint of something else you don't hear often over the phone, respect. Maybe even a little laughter hiding behind it. Mr. Russell, he begins. We've reviewed the matter. The local HOA president has been relieved of her position. I stop chewing. My brow furrows. He carries on, she will restore your property to its original condition, and she's been fined $5,000 for unauthorized use of private property. $5,000. More than I made in 2 months of overtime and side jobs. And she's paying it, for thinking she could waltz in and occupy my garage like it was her property. He mentions a professional crew will be in this week to safely remove the welds, and that my gate should be fully functional by Wednesday. By Wednesday afternoon, I'm packing up in the back of my truck, my armor gone, but my mission accomplished. Something about heading home feels different now, as if I'm not returning from some petty squabble, but from a hard-won battle. A man who stood his ground. Pulling into the driveway, I see George and Buddy waiting under the maple tree. The neighborhood's turned out too, all smiles, nods, and waves. Let me tell you, that kind of welcome wall of support turns a man's chest into solid steel. When I climb out of the cab, people applaud like I just hit the walk-off in Game 7. The neighbor lady is there with a casserole that smells like Sunday supper. The family across the street hands me a crayon-drawn card with Garage Hero, scrawled across the front, me in a superhero cape holding a welding torch. The Vietnam vet tips his beer in salute. Even cranky old Mr. Hayes nods his head like I just did something real. It wasn't about winning some cheap neighborhood glory, it was about drawing a line. Reclaiming respect, not just for me, but for everybody who'd felt silenced. And it hits me, this little stand of mine, it meant more than just a gate. It meant hope, solidarity, pride, things you don't get from brochures or bylaws. Then the pros arrive around 5 p.m. 4 seasoned techs, torches and grinders ready. They don't smirk or shake their heads, they work methodically, quietly. No jokes, no judgments. Just respect, maybe for my handiwork, maybe for the principle behind it. Metal pops, ground sparks fly, and by 6:30 the welds are cut clean. Mechanism moves freely for the first time in weeks. I hit the remote, gate opens. Just like that. Freedom hums. Sharon, who wouldn't forgive me with a $1,000 cage, steps out of her white Lexus. Face red, lip trembles, but heads in. Like she's going through the motions. She drives both cars out, first her triggers, then the backup. Not a word. Not a nod. Just cold, stiff silence. But the neighbor lady can't resist a parting shot. You missed a spot on the paint, Sharon. Like the softest MIC drop you ever heard. Sharon doesn't flinch. She just reverses out and drives straight off like she's hauling the weight of her pride with her. You'd think silence means awkwardness, but no. The quiet aftermath is calming, cleansing, like a storm broke and the air finally smells clean. The neighbor lady wipes her hands, grins, good riddance. George salutes. Mr. Hayes snarls, guess dictators don't like open roads. Nobody cheers, this moment didn't need fireworks. Sometimes the absence of noise is more powerful than applause. Rumor circulates she was crying behind the wheel. Could be. I didn't look. I wanted my victory neat, not messy with pity. That night, the street became alive again. Neighbors brought lawn chairs, beer, stories. The air carried laughter and plans. Movie night, someone declared, and we sat under the stars. No rules about noise or gate times or closed curtains. Just community. It's been weeks since I've seen her. House went up for sale with that telltale motivated seller sign. You know the kind that means get me out of here and quick. About a month later I'm back in my garage, cedar shavings drifting, Buddy snoring in his corner where his always belonged. I glance at the gate and see an envelope slipped under it. No postmark. My name in careful script. Inside. Mr. Russell, you taught me a lesson I needed. I was wrong. Your garage is beautiful. It could have been her, or someone reading for her. A forced apology. But it didn't matter. It felt real. Like a chapter finally closing. The HOA has a new president, a retired teacher who actually asks for opinions before making rules. One of the first things he did? Axe half of Sharon's nonsense regulations. Property values now measured in lives lived, not lawn heights. Gates time? Respect, not quantities. Garage doors open when open, closed when closed. I even made a new sign, Clay's Garage, 30 years of honest work. Open at 7 a.m., closed on my terms. Painted it myself, hand grain, pine board, vintage style. Now, every morning, the gate hums open at 7 sharp and closes whenever the hell I feel like it. Buddy stretches beside it. My radio plays classic rock. Neighbors stroll in to chat. Laughter drifts through the garage. No citations, no inspections, no clipboard-wielding tycoons. Here's what I learned. Some things are worth dirty hands, ticking off bureaucrats, burning midnight oil and risking trouble. A man's workspace is sacred, his corner of order and creativity. After 20 years, I ain't giving that up for anything or anyone. And next time someone tries to fence what's yours by threatening fines and rules, you stand tall. You build. You weld. You hold the line. Doesn't have to be a fight with fists or lawsuits. Sometimes a welding torch, a camera, a backbone is enough. Every morning when that gate swings open and that motor hums, I remember. Not all wars are loud. This one won on a spark, a silent stand, and a whole neighborhood waiting for someone to say not today. That's worth more than any title or rulebook. The end.